Hey guys, I'm Ronnie, and today I will be talking about computer hardware, so I'll be going through how each of them works. So let's start. Let's start with the motherboard. Number one, the motherboard is one of the most important components of a computer because it connects every single device together, including storage devices like hard drives, optical drives, floppy drives, I don't know, something like that, if you still have a floppy drive. And then it connects expansion cards, and then the front USB ports to your chassis to your motherboard by headers, as well as audio, and then the CPU, which is the brain. We'll talk about that later, so-called brain. And then we have RAM, which is system memory. And then we have the 24-pin motherboard connector, power connector. So powers the motherboard, and then that one powers the CPU. And this one also powers every single component on the motherboard, except if you have a very high-end graphics card, or you have a quite high-end graphics card and requires external power from your power supply, which we'll also cover later. And yeah, so a motherboard it comes in different sizes, like my mini ATX, micro ATX, standard ATX, and eATX. So enthusiast boards holds multiple CPUs. Most common ones are two. Often comes in either eATX or XL-ATX, but nowadays they only come in eATX. Seldom comes in XL-ATX. So you have to grab a supported chassis, which in that case you will need a full tower. So yeah, moving right along, we have the CPU, which stands for Central Processing Unit, and it's the brain of the computer, although it's not alive. So there are two major manufacturers which make them, which are Intel and AMD. Now, Intel processors are used commonly, and AMD processors are used especially for custom-built gaming PCs, which are low budget when the user decides to spend more on the graphics card. So remember to subscribe to the channel, because a gaming PC shopping guide will be coming before Christmas. So, moving back to the CPU is divided into two major parts, which are the control unit, as known as the CU, and the arithmetic and logic unit, which is one unit. The arithmetic and logic unit is one unit, which is called, in other words, the ALU. The control unit controls system resources such as the RAM and the on-chip cache, and what clock speed the CPU is going to be running at. Also, the arithmetic and logic units, the ALU, do maths and also reads data such as ones and zeros, which 1 is yes and 0 is no. So different CPUs have different sockets, and this CPU has an LGA 11. This is an Intel CPU. This is the Intel Pentium G2120. It has the LGA 1155 socket, which is an old socket, by the way, which means there are 1155 pins on the motherboard, and LGA means they are located on the motherboard instead of the CPU, and the CPU will have contact points. So, the second most important component of the computer is RAM, which stands for Random Access Memory. So the CPU is the most important computer component. So the RAM is the main memory of the computer, so it holds programs and data temporarily, and unlike the hard drive, it only stores data temporarily, and data stored inside RAM sticks. In this case, we can hold up to 2 RAM sticks, and this is the mini ITX motherboard. So nowadays, ATX motherboard that are for custom built PCs usually hold 4 DIMMs. So, like the hard drive, it only stores data temporarily, and data stored inside RAM sticks will disappear after the computer is turned off. So, of course, even compared to the SSD, RAM is still much faster these days. The most common memory size of single RAM stick on DDR3 modules, which are here, are 1 GB to 8 GB. So, however, on ECC modules, they can have a lot higher capacities on each models, such as 16 GB on each, and even 32 GB on each. So the most common RAM types on the market are DDR3 and DDR4, which are new modules because the release of Haswell E in late August this year, they only support DDR4 and they have special motherboards for them. The next thing is ROM. ROM is also a main memory of the system. So ROM stands for read-only memory, and it's a chip on the motherboard. In our case, we don't know which one because it's not obvious these days. But in the old days, it has a very tall chip on the motherboard, like this one. This one is not a chip, but a part of the rear I/O. Anyway, so what it does, is that it stores the logo of the manufacturer of the motherboard and also the BIOS. So, ROM is since ROM is read-only, the data stored inside cannot be edited or wiped easily, and it must be sent back to the manufacturer through the computer to edit the data inside, but it will often and usually take a long time. So it will not disappear after the computer. Unlike RAM, it will not disappear after the computer is turned off, but it does not function like a hard drive, because a hard drive can delete data and write data, well, where else the ROM can only read data from it permanently. It stores data permanently, but it cannot be written by the user itself. So the memory size of ROM of the motherboard nowadays is usually megabytes or kilobytes. Moving along is the hard drive. So a hard drive is a secondary storage device which all your programs and your operating systems store on. For example, Windows, Mac, or Linux. So for example, for mechanical hard drives, it has a platter and a moving head, which is used for reading data on the hard drive using magnetic connections between the platter and the reading head. So which is here on the inside. Obviously we can't see it now. The moving head of the hard drive and the platters should not contact, although they are very close to each other. So the most common spinning speeds of a hard drive nowadays are 5400 revolutions per minute on a 2.5-inch hard drive, and 7200 revolutions per minute on a 3.5-inch hard drive. While mechanical hard drives are called HDD, which stands for hard disk drives, and a solid-state drive, which is also a drive, is called an SSD. Unlike mechanical hard drives, it does not have moving parts, and it is a lot more faster than mechanical hard drives, as they use NAND flash memory instead of platters and reading heads. The advantage of SSDs include quiet operations, a lot faster read and write speeds, and a longer lifespan because they don't have moving parts. The common capacities of an SSD are 64 gigabytes, 128 gigabytes, 256 gigabytes, 512 gigabytes, and 1 terabyte. However, SSDs are very, very expensive these days. So moving along is the power supply. So a power supply is one of the most important parts of a computer, as it supplies electricity to the motherboard and as well as every device it connects to. So for example, this is the 24-pin motherboard connector, which powers every component plugged into the motherboard except high-end graphics card, which requires one of these power on the graphics card. And then they also power hard drives, which are here. They powers hard drive by a separate connector, and optical drives, which we'll talk about later. As well as every single peripherals like LED fans by Molex Power. I think you can see it, Molex, yeah, there. And yeah, The common amount of power that they output is 400 watts for a low-end system, 500 watts for an entry-level gaming system, 750 watts for editing systems, in particular for me with a single graphics card and an extreme processor, 1000 watts for doing SLI and multi-graphics card configurations, and even more. So to put everything together, we have the chassis. So the chassis is the shell of the system unit. So protects other computer components from being electrically shocked or by statics or bumped, so as to reduce physical damage to the system. So most common sizes are mini ATX, micro ATX, and standard ATX, even eATX and XL ATX, depending on your motherboard size. They can also be classified into mini tower, mid tower, and full tower. After talking about the essential components of the computer, the non-essential components of the computer, which are not absolutely necessary but will vary for your needs. So not everyone needs a DVD drive nowadays because they can even install operating system using USBs. So DVD drives are also included in secondary storage, and it is called an optical disk drive or ODD. In our case, this one is an LG 24X DVD burner, so that it can burn DVDs and even support dual layer DVDs, which are up to 8.5 gigabytes each. Another non-essential component is the graphics card. So since CPUs now come with onboard graphics, it is not absolutely necessary anymore, since the motherboard already has outputs like VGA, or in newer models they have HDMI, even DisplayPort and DVI. So unless you are having, so like me, before I played Minecraft on my system, so I'll need a graphics card to do it. So because the Intel integrated graphics isn't great enough, so this one will do very fine. This is an Inno3D GT630 graphics card, so it's good for playing very non-demanding games. Even it can play perhaps Battlefield 4 on low settings, even at 30 frames per second. So that's pretty much all the hardware in a standard computer that you may have at your home. So thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video for weekly content. So subscription is free, so make sure you do that right now, and we will see you next time. Bye.